Hi team, good morning everyone. We'll start in a few minutes. Yeah, team, in the last session, we had discussed about static keyword. Let me open the document. So today what we do is we'll continue with constructor concept and then inheritance. Probably we will complete this Java thing this week. This is the last week for Java. Then we'll switch to the Selenium back. Where is this constructor? Yeah, here. In the last class, what we did is, yes, it was a very good session uh, last Friday. We were talking about access modifiers, not even static keyword. We had discussed about static and we discussed about access modifiers, private, protected, and then public, all this stuff. Then before we switch to the inheritance, okay, we need to discuss about this topic, what we call constructors. Okay, let us see that. Yeah, we have this topic constructors here. Okay, before I continue, please confirm if I'm audible and the screen is visible to all of you. Just can you please type in the chat box? Oh, thank you then. Thank you. So no problem. Maybe I should share you with this Friday session alone. I believe I have shared all other recordings. We'll do that today. And apart from that, yeah, we don't have any pendings. If needed, I'll share all the recordings once again. Now let's get back to constructors. What is this? So now we had discussed all the basics of Java. Yes, all the basics of Java, the fundamentals. And then also we had discussed about object class. And then also we discussed about this access modifiers and then static keyword, all this stuff. Now, another important topic in Java. Not only in Java, this is important for any OOP, object-oriented programming. So what is constructor? See, again, this is not a new topic for us. Constructor is not new topic again. Like methods, if you are already familiar with methods, we can conclude that we are good with constructors. But only difference is we should have that a quick understanding what is this constructor and what is difference between method and constructor. This is the difference we should understand. That's all. Once you are clear with this, I don't think this is difficult. I don't think we have any issue. But point is, we are not new to constructors because if you are really familiar with methods, constructors are almost similar to methods. Only there are few differences that we need to understand. Okay, let's start with that. What is this now? Constructor is a special method. Already we know we had discussed about methods, two types of methods, default method and parameterized method. Now, coming to the constructor, constructor is a special method which is having same name as class name. That is one thing. Second thing, a constructor doesn't have a, see, this is important. So what is that? This is a special method which has same name as class name. Anyhow, we see that with an example. Second thing, observe these four points. Just remember these 4 points. That is enough. It doesn't have a return type. Method have return type, right? But constructor don't return any values. No return type with constructors. That is second thing. And it has same name as class name. Exactly same name as class name. And third thing, and the purpose of constructor. Like methods means methods are used to implement business logic. Business logic in sense it can be not only business logic, it can be used to implement any type of different logics like initialization logic, business logic, database logic. Like that, methods can be used in multiple ways. But constructor has a specific purpose. What is that? It is used to initialize instance variables of a class, just instance variables. And another important point is if it is method, you must call it if you want to execute method. If you should execute method, you must call that. But if it is constructor, it is automatically called because constructor calling is part of object. Whenever an object is created, constructor is automatically called. So that's why you don't need to call constructor explicitly, programmatically, like how you do for methods, like any method, default or parameterized. That is not needed for constructors. Clear, right? We'll see all that examples. Okay, friends. Right. So next after this. So let me open. Yes. Next one. These are all important points about constructor. What is that? What is constructor? Will it have a return type? And what is the purpose of constructor? Okay, all these things. Now, types of constructors. Generally, we have two types of constructors, default and parameterized. Default means a constructor without parameters is known as default constructor. Okay, simple, same thing, same like methods only. If it is a method, default method parameterized, right? What is default method? A method without parameters. Parameterized a method with parameters. Same thing here. What is default constructor? A constructor without parameters is known as default constructor. For example, you see this is the syntax. You have a class name like this. And inside this, you should declare a constructor like this. Access modifier, we know. We can have public, private, protected, or default. But generally, constructors would be either default or public or protected. But it's very rarely we declare constructors as private. So if so, private constructors are very rare. If you ask me why means if you declare a constructor as private, then you cannot create an object for that class. Again, this is an important interview question again. So how do you avoid creating objects means for a class? How do we avoid creating object for a class? This is one famous interview question. One way is okay, declaring this right as the constructor of a class as private. So what is this, friends? The constructor of the class as a private. So this is the best way. So when you do this, automatically it doesn't allow you to create object for the class outside that class. Is this point clear now? This is one famous interview question. Hope this should be clear for all of you. Understood now? So this is a quick idea. What is that? What is uh, how do we avoid creating object for a class means declaring the constructor of a class as private. Other than that, it can be the constructor is can be public, private, protected, or default, but recommended is most of the times it will be public. Why? Usually in a class, methods would be public and variables will be private. That is the important standard we follow in real-time code. Remember, repeating the statement. How do you declare a class, or how do you create, develop code in real-time applications is variables usually will be private, methods will be public, including constructors. And very rarely it will be some other access like private or protected or default. In very few cases, it would be having other access, but in majority of the cases, it would be public. Clear? So this is a quick idea about constructor. If you see, this is the syntax. What is that? Class name. And if you look at this syntax, access modifier, class name. If you see the class, the name of class and the name of constructor both are exactly same. And this parenthesis is, if you look at this, there are no variables inside this. This is default constructor. That's all we are done. For example, if the name of class is car, then you can declare it as a public. And other important point we discussed is in majority of the cases, the access of these methods or constructors, right, would be public in most of the cases. In very few cases, it would be private or protected or default. Okay, just remember the actual standard is variables should be declared private, methods should be declared public. And in few cases, if it is needed, it can be having other type of access. Okay, I'm not saying it is 100% needed. 100% it should be like that. But in majority of the cases, I'm saying that's about constructor. Let us do a quick example so that you can easily understand the concept of constructors. So what we do, let us quickly take a simple new. Also, if you want, we can use the same thing. This file is saved as a.java, no? Okay, no problem. Okay, I removed the comment, no issues. And now save this as a t.java and remove public here to test this example. You know, right? You remember these rules, right? If you have n public classes in a file, then we have to save each public class in a separate file name. Got it, friends? That is very important rule. So what do you do now? Simply refactor it and save as a t1.java, refactor, rename, and then instead of a, change it to t1. Finish. Finish. So, and then what is that? Public static void main. T1 object is created. Let's remove all this. This is not needed for now. By error, still error. Oh, T1 is already defined, no issues. So class A, you can take a simple quick example of class car. Let me keep this T1 as a test class, okay? Now we are talking about constructor concept. So what do we do right now? Simply speaking, default constructor means what? Let's quickly complete step by step. Maybe if we are seeing an error with car means this class is somewhere defined in this package in some file. So that's why if you just you can if already if you see this error, change this. That's all car one. That would be fine. Now first thing, you know what is the purpose of constructor? Constructor is used to initialize instance variables of a class. So first declare instance variables. So what is that? You are defining instance variables. What is that we have? How to declare instance variables? Nothing but attributes for car. So what are attributes for car? Car has name. We should declare that. Car has color. Car has number. Car has that brand. So first thing you should declare car name, then and then car color, and then car type means whether it is a Benz or BMW or otherwise something Hyundai or anything. Okay, and then string type of car. Okay, next one price of car, double price of car. So these are the instance variables. If you want, you can add more. And in a real programming, usually variables are declared as private. If you go and look into any real code, okay, maybe it might be any OOP, object-oriented programming. What is the standard developers follow is variables are declared private, methods are declared public. Remember, friends, I'm just giving way covering a few more important points apart from the topic so that we save some time. Double price. So this is exact standard how we declare instance variables. Once we declare variables like this, the next thing is initialize this instance variables through a constructor. How to declare this constructor? Constructor has same name as class name. So what do you do right now? Public. Usually methods are declared public, variables are private in a class in Java. Not only in Java, we follow this standard in almost all OOP, object-oriented programming languages. Public car1, same name as class name. You see that. This is having same name as class name. That is constructor. If it is a method, method doesn't follow the constructor naming standard. It should not have same name as class name. Method already you know. Method follows what it starts with lowercase or and then every inner word starting letter should be uppercase. But here, constructor should follow same name as class name. The start letter of this constructor itself is uppercase. And this naming standard is applicable only for constructors. Don't apply this for methods. So a quick example before I switch to the topic. So this is a method public void some get data. Let us take the example. Get data parenthesis body. This is the naming standard. So what is the for classes? It should always start with uppercase and every inner word means internal word starting letter should be uppercase. That is the naming standard we follow for a class. Point one. Point two, for a method, starting should be lowercase. Any word it might be, it should start with lowercase and every inner word starting letter. After that, if any word comes, each starting letter should be uppercase. This is the naming standard we follow for any method in Java. But for constructors, it should have same name as class name. So the naming standard of constructor is nothing but naming standard of a class. But this is applicable only for constructor, but not for methods, remember. So now what should I do in this constructor? Simply initialize this instance variables. Simply speaking, name equal to some, okay, name of the car, bench. Okay, next one. Color you can initialize. Select color you can choose anything of your size, something like black. Okay, and then type of car. Again, there are some series, right? bin V class or some D class or something. So here type of car equal to some E. Next one after that, and then price of car. Price, maybe you just take it as some 1 crore, anything of your choice. I don't know what I give, but just let it be like that. Excuse me, friends. Okay, this is idea about what how to initialize instance variables. This is how you do in Java. In a real Java programming, we don't use methods to initialize instance variables. Rather, we prefer to use constructors to initialize instance method. This is a quite a standard we follow in Java. Maybe if you ask me about other C or C sharp or Python means C, almost all languages follow the similar standard. But we are focusing in Java, so we talk more about Java thing only. So this is a quick idea. Maybe if you ask me few questions, can't I use a method to initialize instance variables? Yes, why not? There is nothing wrong with that. But recommended way, the standard way we need to follow is use a constructor. Don't use a method to initialize instance variables in a real Java programming. Okay. And at the same time, if you come up with a question, how about methods? Can't I use a method to initialize instance variables means? What is the answer? Yes, if you want, you can do that. But what is the standard approach? Recommended way, what is that? Use constructor. Then which one you follow? Do you use method or do you use constructor for this? We use constructor. Then again, you might ask me a question. Then where should we use methods? Methods can be used in multiple ways. It has variety of purposes, right? They are used to implement all that logic, right? Anywhere we use methods only, except in few cases like this, right? So this is a quick idea. Understood now? Now other things. Now I want to print these values. Then I need a method now. I don't use constructor to print values. Of course, if you want, you can add prints in this constructor and you can execute the code. Nothing happens. But again, in a real programming, we don't put prints inside a constructor. We use constructor only to initialize instance variables. So public void display. I'm using another method to print these values. And then system.out.println. What shall I do now? Name. And maybe if you want, you can add this. The name is. We have discussed about concatenation operator, right? So I am adding a string with this. Okay. The name is next one. And again, the color is. You can add if you want. Okay. The type is, and then the price is like this. Okay. So we are done. This is a perfect OOP class. We have private variables, public methods. So this is a perfect Java class. We can say this is a standard Java class. Why it is standard? We are exactly following all the standards that is needed to declare a class. So, and this approach, we call this as encapsulation. Encapsulation is protecting your data. It's a way of protecting data. You know, right? All the features of OOP, object, class, encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, polymorphism. We know object now, we know class now. But the third thing, encapsulation, if you ask me, this is encapsulation. You made your data as private, and then you are exposed, you are not, when you make this data as private, this is not allowed to access outside directly. Private data is not accessible outside directly. Means what? You are protecting your data, but you are intelligently, you are carefully exposing this data to outside through methods, not directly. Through methods, you are exposing in an indirect way. And this approach is encapsulation. Understood now? Encapsulation is nothing but wrapping of data and methods into a single unit. And usually in this approach, data should be private and methods should be public. So when you make this data as private, it is not exposed outside, and this public methods will have access to this private data. And this approach we call this as encapsulation. This is loosely coupled encapsulation. So this encapsulation is a loose encapsulation. Maybe if you ask me, there is one more tight encapsulation. Tightly coupled encapsulation, loosely coupled encapsulation. See how many things we are quickly getting here. Apart from understanding the concept of constructor, we are also parallelly trying to get the concept of Java quickly. So what is this? Is it loosely coupled encapsulation or tightly coupled encapsulation? This is loosely coupled. Usually it would be like this only. Tightly coupled means what is that tight encapsulation? Tight means everything is private. Everything is private means then it is the most toughest situation. If you make everything private, then you cannot access them outside. Then we don't have a purpose of these classes. There is no use of developing all this code. How best code you develop if everything is private, then it is not accessible to outside. Then there is nothing much use of these classes to us. That's why we should have loose encapsulation, not tight encapsulation. Is this clear for all of you friends? If you ask me why not public methods should be private means if we put methods private, it's like locking every penny and everything of your money in a locker. Even if you want use also, it's put in a locker in a private bank. Then what should you do when you told to that banker, don't you allow this outside, even myself means what happens? Is there any use of that money? No use. Same thing here also. So that's why Java has designed like this. What is that? Data should be private and method should be public. I hope this is clear. And this is a concept of even encapsulation. This is a loose and loosely encapsulated class. When it is tightly encapsulated, every member in the class should be private, and that is not recommended. And this is the recommended one. So now, apart from discussing constructor in this session, you also come to know about another important feature of OOP, encapsulation. Encapsulation is wrapping data and methods into a single unit. That is nothing but a class. And usually when you say encapsulation means data should be private. That then this happens in majority of declarations in Java. In most of the cases in a real code, in a real-time code, your data will be private and methods will be public, private or default in majority of the cases. Very rarely these methods will be public. Sorry, private, sorry. Very rarely it will be private. Okay. This is a quick idea. I hope you are clear now. Next, what? Now we should go for this is step one. We have created a class. Step two, go for creating object. So once you create class, next what is that? Create a object. So here this one, we have created class. Okay. And these are instance variables. This is a constructor. You can simply say this is usually writing comments is always a best habit. And printing values. Okay. And the last at the end. So create an object now. So car1c equal to, right, how to create object? New car1 semicolon. So here one important point you should observe. As per the 4 points we have seen for constructor, we have observed for constructor. First thing, it has same name as class name. See, class name and constructor is same name. So this point 1 is observed. Point 2, it is used to initialize instance variables of a class. Then we have seen that as well. Point 3, like methods, you don't need to call constructors. Sorry, like methods, you don't need to call constructors. Why? A constructor is automatically called. Is automatically called whenever an object is created. Maybe you can ask me a question. So how is that possible? Means it's not like we are not calling constructor, but the point is simple. In this object, there are two parts. The left part is reference part, right part is object part. Actually, object is right part, not left part. I'll just prove that in this now itself. Okay, in few minutes I'll show that as well. Right is object, not left one. But this is always a recommended way, because if you have reference, every time we use reference to access this object. Now, in this object, there are two parts, a new operator which allocates memory for this object. We see that, right? When we run this program at the right side in this window, you observe that variables, all that created, right? Object creation, and that variables are present inside that object, all that. So memory for that object is allocated by this new operator. Once that object is created with some values, the initialization of that object means what? Initializing the variables inside that object is done through this constructor. That's why the second part is constructor calling. This car with brackets. Always remember, anywhere in any language, if you see this brackets means that is a method. Okay, this car and brackets is a constructor calling, like method calling. I will just see that. This is constructor calling, and this is automatically called when this object is created. So you don't need to call this constructor explicitly, like how you do for methods by using reference. In a way, we are calling constructor. Without calling, none of the methods will be called. But for constructor, the calling is implicitly declared part of object, so it is automatically called. This is automatically called whenever this object is created. Maybe if you want, I can show a debug and show you also. Maybe if you doubt, this is done, friends. Remember this point again. And this doesn't have a return type. You see another fourth point. Method has a return type, but you don't see return type for a constructor because constructors don't return values. By looking at the code, you can observe all the points we had discussed about constructor. What is that? It has same name as class name, initializes instance variables of a class, called automatically when object is created, and then no return type. So so all that we can see here. After that, what should we do? Call the method. How do you call C dot display? Now, if you see, we are explicitly calling method, but constructor we are not calling, because once we create object, it is automatically called. This is a clear idea about a constructor thing. That is fine. Now, what do you do right now? Right click, run as Java application, and proceed launch. And you can see the output here. Okay, maybe this space you can put little bit of space here. What you can do, and then run as Java application. Type done. Maybe if you want to explore deeper in this, just put a debugging point here, just to understand how this works. To run this in debug mode. Trying to add a debug point. Yeah, you can see that small pimple kind of ball here. That is a breakpoint, what we call. Right, I have shown this. This is not the first time we are debugging. I'm just showing you again. Right click and then debug as Java application. Proceed. Allow. Allow firewall. Now you can see this. This is the static method. So your JVM is calling this with class name directly T1, that T1 dot main. Now execution started, and then main method is called, and then the control just started with the first statement in main. You can see here. Before that, arguments are created here in memory. You can see this. This right side window shows you, it shows all the different variables, everything that gets created in memory. Now we came to the constructor thing. What happens now? Now object gets created. You can see that in the right side window. Once we move to the next statement, it jumps there. Now this is constructor is a method, right? Maybe if you want to see trace this, you go here and then say step into, not step over. Step over means executing line by line. Step into means if you think something is a method call, then you should say step into. Now what happened now if you see, what happened now friends? If you see from line 34, you have jumped to line 12. Why? This is a constructor. And then your as this is a call to constructor, object as implicit call to constructor, then the control jumps from constructor call to constructor. Now you see here. Excuse me, friends. And meanwhile, you see here. Meanwhile, you see your instance variables are, this is the object. Object is created for this class, that is C. C is the object. And the same time, what happened? All that instance variables are present inside object and they are set to default values. Maybe this you should have a quick idea about default values. If you don't assign any values to the instance variables in the beginning, by default, some value is set to that variables, some standard values. So this is designed by the Java people. Okay, the some standard value is set to this instance variables. And those values are called default values. Is this clear to all of you friends? This is the quick idea, right? So just a minute, friends. Sorry, there is some noise from outside. So now if you see, this is clear, friends. What are these default values? Let me quickly share, add those here. Suppose if it is any reference type, means string or any class type of variables, reference type, the default is always null. And if it is any integer, let me be byte, short, int, long, okay, any integer type, so it is 0. Any decimal, float or double, 0.0. And then boolean is by default false. Okay, so and what else? Anything else? So reference type, null, integer, that's all. Character will default use a space. So these are the default values, friends. Understood now? So if you don't initialize any values to the instance variables of a class, this one, or variables of a class here, by default, they are set to default values. Default values are the values which are provided by the JVM if you don't initialize any values to these variables in a class. Right? So what are those means? If you ask me, these are the defaults. Right, these are the default values. Now color is string. These are all reference types, color type and name. So the null is set to them and price is the double. They are set to 0.0. Before your constructor is executed, if you see here, friends, this object is set to default values. The object means object and the variables inside object. What variables exist inside object? The instance variables of a class exist inside object. And this represents the object of this class, that is car1. Remember. Now, these values which were initialized to defaults now will get modified, will get updated or changed once this construct is executed. Now you see line by line. Here, each time one assignment is executed, and here the values keep updating here. Each time one assignment statement is executed, one value gets updated here. One value in sense that variable gets updated. Now name first. Let's go step by step. Step over. Now, if you see here, now we came to name. Once it moves to the next 14th line, then name is set to bench here. You can see here, name is still null. It is set to bench now. Let's again see. Now you can see here, name got modified to bench. Again, another one, color. Now again, color is set to black here. Next, another one. Type is set to E here. Another one. Price is set to, you can see E. This is, it's giving you exponential value. No problem. Scientific notation. No issues. But still, if you see, when this constructor is executed internally and each time one variable is executed, each time one line gets executed here, then one value is updated in the object here, if you see at the right side. And this is what happens with this constructor. This initializes this instance variables. Earlier they are set to default values. Once this constructor is executed, those default values are replaced with this values which we assign in the constructor. And this is what constructor does. It initializes this instance variables of the class. So this is very detailed observation, friends. Very detailed observation, right? So this is a quick idea. Understood now? Once this execution is done, the control jumps back to your calling method, calling instance main method. Now we are at line 34, then it jumps to line 35 now. Now again say, see this. When I say this, the control again came back from constructor to this object because this is where it has started and it came back to the same line. Now, again, if I say step over, it goes to display method. Okay, it goes to the next line. Then this is method, right? Again, a quick question. Is it a normal statement or a method? If it is actually a normal statement, just say step over. If it is a method call, then you should say step into. When you say step into, again, what happens? This display method is called on this object car so that it will go and fetch values, this instance variables from the object. This method is called on object, right? So it operates on this object, and display now is trying to print values from object. So it fetch those values from this object, from those instance variables from this object. Now go one by one, step over. Now name is printed from object. It gets from here and prints that. And again, what is that? Color is printed from the object. You can see here. And again, type is printed from the object. Okay. And again, third one. I think I didn't modify this here. Small, this thing is a color and then small change, friends. Just a minute. Okay, and then type and then see here. I'm not just only talking about constructors. There is a lot of other subtopics inherently covered here. So there are many things we discussed because these are all important things to know when you are a Selenium tester, because when Java is there, these things are essential to know, right? So maybe you might think why all this for us, because we are here for Selenium. Why you are talking too much of all this? Because all these fundamentals are important to know. So right click and then run as Java application. Sorry, we can go line by line here, right? So step over, step over, step over. Then it printed all those values here from the object from here. Right, friends? Then finally what? It will, the control is written back to the call, method call. It comes here to line 35, step over, it came back to this one. And once it come back, execution is completed. You can see now it will be at 38. Execution of main is done. There are no more statements in the main. Then when you say step over, excuse me, the control is written back to JVM and that will end the execution of the program. So it got terminated now. So this is a quick idea about what is that, what is happening when object is created, how object is created here, and what constructor is doing on this object, all this. And this is a quick idea about default constructor. And we have observed all the important points of constructor. What is constructor? Purpose of constructor. Should we call constructor? And other important, does a constructor have a return type? We had discussed all this. And this is default constructor. And this is not always recommended in a real time. So, and actual way to call this constructor is by using parameterize. The actual way to initialize this instance variables is using parameterized constructor. So what should we do now? Instead of this instance variables, sorry, instead of this uh, hard coding, instead of doing this hard coding directly, use parameters. So now we are going to use parameterized method, next scenario. So I hope now you should be clear with all this. In the process, we also learned many things. We came to know about default values. Defaults means always any reference type is null and integer is set to 0. Remember this, friends. And decimal is 0.0, boolean is false, and character is space. And also I told you one more important point before we switch to this topic. What is the topic? Parameterized constructor. We'll finish all that today. That 10 more minutes is enough for us to cover parameterized as well. I told you one point. Many of these developers have a lot of confusion. Which is object in this? Is the right part or the left part? Can you please answer this question in the chat box? Can you please answer this question in the chat box? I have quick questions to all of you. Let's have a quick answers. Which is object here? Because I hearing this, people calls the C as object. But now the question is, which is the actual object, right or left? Please answer in the chat box. If it is wrong also, it's fine. We are not doing any testing here. Exactly, right part is the object. Then you might ask me, so don't we need left means? Definitely we need this in a real code because we can't come 100% depend on pure object. But the question is, how do we prove that exactly this is object and this is just a simple reference? Do one thing, remove this. Remove it. Now what did we do now? What did we do, friends? First thing, we are calling object. Second, now if you don't have reference, then you can't call method, right? Remove this also. Then there is a way. If you don't have reference, this is actually not a standard way, but I'm just showing you to prove that left is not object, right is object, left is just reference. I'll show these scenarios. There are two, three cases which you should understand. Okay, so right is object. And again, if you just create object, it's not enough. You should call display also, right? When you don't have reference, how do you call these methods of class on this object? Is there any way for that? Any way for that? Yes or no? Again, quick answers in the chat box, friends. Answer is yes. How? Like this, you can directly call a method on object. Like if you see on that object, I said dot. When I said dot, you can see all the methods of that object, of that class. You can see display in that list of methods. Of course, we ignore about all this. Maybe in one session, I'll quickly talk about what are all other methods you see here. Click on display now. This is actually a valid approach, but this is only just for instant purpose. This is not 100% useful for us. This is just a temporary use. That's all. Now, what is happening here? Two things are happening in one shot. One, object is getting created. Two, we are also calling the method same time. Excuse me, friends. So now, right click. Now you see, without object we can't display, but now we are able to do that. Now right click and then say run as and then Java application and proceed. Now you can see the output here. Are you able to see object getting created and display method being called, right? And also you can see the output. But this is a temporary output. You cannot capture this anywhere. Suppose if you want to use it later, then we cannot get this reference of this object. Why? This is just created and then we call method there and then it goes to garbage collection. This is just an anonymous object. It doesn't have any external references. When you don't have external reference, this objects becomes what? Anonymous objects without any name. Means these are just for temporary purpose. They just created and just does some work and then they just gets garbage collected. Is this clear, friends? Or am I trying to I am confusing you with all this more information? Right? So this gets garbage collected once this step is done. Then you have to hold this for a while. Then that is where references comes into the rescue. Means references are very useful when if you want to hold object for a longer time, these references are needed. But point is references are not actual thing. Object is the actual, the right side part, just showing that point, proving that point to you. Now again, let's go to the left part. Now you see, friends. Let's see car C. Just to declare only reference. So car 1, of course, car 1 C. Only reference now. Now quick question to you. Now do we have object now or not? I just declared reference now. Do you think this class has object with this or it doesn't have object with this? Or did we create object for this class or we didn't create object for this class? Please answer in the chat box, friends. Now at present at line 34, did we create object or not? This is the question, friends. Just please quickly answer in the chat box. Please give me your answers. Right or wrong, no problem. So we don't have any issue. Do we have object here or not at line 34 at present? Answer is what, friends? No, right? Some of you are clearly pointing that. Then again, you might ask me a question. How do you prove that, Manoram? Simple, right? If you don't have object, you know, right? These are instance variables and instance methods, and we can call them only by creating object. Without creating object, we can't access instance variables or instance methods. Now, just to prove that point, I'm calling display method on this reference C and put semicolon. Don't fail to syntactically see when I say, if you see here, C dot display, what is happening? It's showing an error. Read that error, please, friends. Read that error. See that? And you can otherwise do one thing. It is saying that C is a local variable. Yes. Any variable declared inside method are local variables. So including this is a variable of class type. We didn't initialize. That is why this error. I'll fix this. Now see here, friends. Put a cursor here. The local variable C might not have been initialized. So what you do? Initialize this to null. No problem. Because you know, right, references default should be set to null. Now this error is removed. On that null reference, I am calling display method. Do you think this display method will print these values now? Bench black E and some 1 crore or something or more than that? Do you think this is printed? What's your answer again? Please answer in the chat box. Yes or no? Will it print in the will it print that all these values? Answer please. Yes or no? But before that, I have a quick question again. Do we have object here? We don't have any object, but we simply set that that reference to null, which is a default. Object doesn't exist. Without object existing, don't even think that this instance variables and these methods exist in memory. Without these variables methods exist in memory, how come you call those methods? It is just a purely hypothetical, friends. It's all imagination. In fact, we are not doing it in a right way. It's as if like you have gone to a marriage reception and they were serving the dinner and you sat there, but no item is ready. But just plate is there, that's all. Then what do you do there? Just think about it. So no, none of the items is ready. Why? Object creation is that only. That cooking concept is not created. Then what happens? No items. Same thing here also. Then you ask me, then you are calling method on this reference. How come this works? Even if I am calling method on this null reference means see what happens now. run as Java application. What happened now? Null pointer exception. Without having any food items in that reception, if you go and sit there, what that people will tell? No items available. Now, even when you call a method on a null reference or a variable on a null reference, if your object doesn't exist, then it leads to an exception which we call null pointer exception. Observe all these things carefully, friends. I hope this is clear for all of you. This is a quick idea. All these are important details you need to know. That's why I'm quickly covering as subtopics. Understood now? Finally, prove. This is proved. What is that? Object is not reference. Object is that new space something. Constructor calling. And if that is not there, and these are just mere spectators. These references are just like not simple things. That's all. They cannot do the real job. Reference is something which holds object. That's all. It's like remote to a TV, which is very important. Of course, both are important if you ask me. But first thing, in first place, TV must exist. Then we can buy that remote, or we can depend on that remote. But actual object is TV, and then reference is like remote. Simply giving you a quick example to remember. Even if without remote you can watch TV, but without TV you cannot watch remote. Same concept is applied here, right? Without reference, still somehow we can have utilize object, but without object, if you have just reference, there is no use of it. And still, if you try to call methods on these null references, it leads to these exceptions. I hope this is a very beautiful observation here. All these are interesting things, not interesting, very necessary things in Java. Sometimes when you're doing testing, you might lead to these kind of exceptions, null pointer exceptions, all this. Then you might have a big doubt why this is coming, because you didn't create an object and you are trying to do something on null reference. What do you get? What do you expect? What do we expect out of null references? Null pointer exception, friends. That's all. Is this clear now? We have proved very clearly many things in this session. What is that? Which is the actual part, right or left? Object or references? Obviously, object is right part is object, not the left one. But still, though if you don't have reference, still that objects are what? Simply they are temporary declarations, and we cannot hold them for longer periods. So that's why references are always a standard way of declaring objects. Assigning objects to references is a standard approach. Is this clear, friends? This is a quick idea about all this. Understood? There is one more quick question before I jump to the topic, new car one. Suppose we have object now. This is perfectly fine. Now we have a perfectly declared class. Now this time I have a quick question before I jump to the next concept, because you need to know all this as a Selenium tester. If you don't know this means again you keep creating classes for Selenium testing. These fundamentals are very important at class level. Now in this program, if you see earlier there is a constructor. We have declared earlier a constructor. So it's called automatically when object is created. Right? This is important point. Maybe we'll stop after this. So, but now in this program, I didn't declare any constructor, right? But still, this object is calling this constructor. Constructor calling is always there. Even if you don't declare constructor in a class, this is there since the beginning of this class and object program. Since last week, we are discussing this, and we didn't declare any constructor. We don't have any compilation error, or we don't have any runtime error. We don't have any of these two types of errors. Still, we are able to write code and we are able to run it successfully. But the question is, how come this gets executed without declaring a constructor in a class? This is a constructor calling to default constructor. You can see here default constructor, but this constructor doesn't exist in the class. Still, you are able to call that. That is the question. How? Suppose you talk about this method display. I remove this method now. When I remove display, immediately there is an error here. See here, it's showing an error. Read that error. The method display is undefined for the type car1. Means usually classes are treated as data types. So that's why it's saying that this class doesn't have display. If I don't have a method, I am not allowed to call that method. But if I don't have constructor, still it is not throwing that error that constructor is not defined. Why this? Why is this special for constructor? Why not for methods? This is the question. Then the answer is what, friends? So in case of constructors, a quick answer is in case of constructors, if you don't declare any constructor in a class, then your JVM will add one default constructor for you. JVM will do what? It will add one default. See, again, the point is very clear. It adds a default constructor only, not anything else, not parameterized. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow. Your JVM will add one default constructor to this class, like how while executing code first, it checks whether programmer declared constructor is there or not. If developer declared constructor is there, it doesn't add any default constructor. But if it is not seeing any constructor in the class, then it will add one default constructor like this. Okay, that's what it does internally. And then it will set this instance variables to default values. Who sets this to default values? Again, JVM does. JVM is again a small interpreter which converts bytecode to machine code, and all that in the process, all this setting to default and all these things is done by the JVM. Got it, friends? This is important point to the. These are all very useful interview questions again. If you don't add constructor to a class, who will add that? JVM. That's why even in the options of your constructor, developer declared constructor, you don't see any error even though you don't declare a constructor, because if you don't declare a constructor, then JVM will declare that too a default constructor, not all types of constructors. Remember this point. So you don't see an error like the error here. If you don't declare a constructor in a class, you won't see any error like this. But that is not the case for display method. Methods are not added by JVM. That's why we see an error here. If you don't declare a method and if you call it this, and you see an error here. Why? Because methods are not added by your JVM automatically. Only constructor. It happens only in the case of constructor, that too in case of default constructors. That's all. This is another important point to be noted in today's session. Is this clear? So these are important things associated with classes and objects. Understand all these things carefully, friends. These things will come handy in some scenarios. Okay. This is all about today's session. We'll catch up in tomorrow and then discuss about what, friends? About the other one. What is that other one? Parameterized constructor in tomorrow's session. Okay. Shall we stop here? I know we have extended a little bit today just to cover this important point. Okay. Any more questions? So now we can just revert back to the code to the normal, like to the previous stage. Okay, now this is perfect one. That's all, friends. Any more questions? This is for today. I hope we covered a lot of subtopics as a apart from this one. Any more questions, friends? Okay, then we'll stop here again. Anyhow, if no questions, we'll catch again tomorrow. And maybe if you have still any simple small doubts, go through the recording. This has very detailed coverage. Okay. Thanks, friends.